my name is Nisa and I'm filming my TTC journey. If you're new here, please feel free to subscribe so you can follow along in my journey to becoming a mother. Otherwise, welcome back. As you can probably tell from the title of this video, I'm going to be talking about my canceled cycle. So if you watched my last video, then you know that I had just finished my second IUI and my second cycle of attempting to get pregnant via IUI, and that was not successful. So I had talked a little bit about my feelings and kind of had an emotional look back at what 2020 had for us, and I just want to say that I'm feeling a lot better than I was during that video, and I am excited I was excited to go into my third IUI round, and so I just wanted to talk about kind of what's happened so far. So first off, I just want to say that I had kind of a longer third cycle here, which ended up leading to us canceling the cycle, but not fully canceling it. We actually ended up doing a Letrozole step up. So if you're not familiar with that, it is when you don't respond to your Letrozole dose and then your cycle is canceled and you have to then take another dose of the Letrozole but at a higher dosage. So that is what happened to me. So I'm going to go through what happened during my monitoring, all of my progesterone levels and what my follicles were measuring, and just to kind of give you an idea of like what that looked like for me, that what ended up prompting me to have to take more Letrozole. Okay, let's go back to the middle of December. So for reference, they say that a mature follicle, or what a follicle range they're looking for when you're ready to trigger, should be between like 20 and 24. I think my clinic, they like it to be at 20. I know some other clinics kind of push for it to be a little bit bigger. So it just depends on your clinic. And the other thing is that your estrogen level, they say a mature follicle, your estrogen level will be around 200. Once again, that could be different for your clinic, just what my clinic goes by. So I had my base level appointment after my second IUI, just a couple days later, after I hit cycle day 14. So I went in for my beta and it was negative, and then like 2 days later, I think, I ended up getting my period. So then I went in on cycle day 3 and had my base level appointment where they did my ultrasound and blood work. So at that appointment, my estrogen was at 35.8 and the biggest follicle was on my right side and it was at an 8 millimeter. So then a few days later, so 12/24, I went back in and my estrogen dropped to less than 5, and weirdly my follicle grew. So I had an 8 on my right, and then on my left I had a 9. And then they had me come back in 3 days later, and my estrogen went back up to a 33.4, but my follicle sizes were staying the same. So I had a 9 on my left and a 9 on my right, and I had a ton of follicles. So it actually looked kind of normal at that point. It looked like, okay, like my estrogen went back up, I'm having all these follicles, they are, growing, so maybe this is like the start of my ramp up. But I went back in 3 days later, so that would have been on December 30th, and my estrogen dropped. So it went down to a 24.7, but my follicle was at a size 10 on the left and a 7 on my right. So my follicles weren't going down, they were still, staying at that 9-10 level. So then they were like, okay, we want you to come back again in 4 more days just to see, or 3 more days just to see what's going on. So I went back on January 2nd and my estrogen went up. It went up to 40, but I only had a 10 again for follicle size. So I had a 10 on my left and a 10 on my right. So kind of like I said, still staying in that range. So I, at that point, had reached out to my doctor and had a I had to ask, like, what's the plan? What are we doing? Where are we at? Because at this point, my original, my first baseline appointment was December 18th. And at this point, I was already at January 2nd. So, and usually when I took my letrozole before and I responded, I had responded by cycle day, I think it was 15 and 18. So I was kind of getting to that point and I just, wasn't really seeing anything, happening. So it was at that point that my doctor said, hey, we're going to continue to monitor you, but you may be at risk at having your cycle canceled. And I haven't not responded to the medication, so I had no idea what that meant. So I did message her being like, what do you mean canceled? Like, what? What do you mean? From my research online though, I had known that sometimes when women with PCOS especially don't respond to letrozole, that their doctor will actually just bump up their dose within that same cycle. So I had asked her if that was possible, and she had said, yeah, that they wanted me to do a few more monitoring, but that could potentially be an option if they didn't want to cancel it. So I was like, okay, well, maybe that's an option. So I went back in 3 days later. So on January 5th, I went back in, and as a reminder, my last appointment, my estrogen was at a 40. And when I went back in, my estrogen dropped again to a 28.5, and what was once size 10 follicles both dropped down to size 8. So I had a size 8 on my left and an 8 on my right. And at that point, I knew. Like at that point, I was like, I'm not responding to the medication. My estrogen just keeps going like up and down, up and down, and up and down, instead of doing that like progressive up. And I just knew at that point, I said, it's just not, I'm just not progressing. So in my head, actually, I wasn't super negative about it. I was like, okay, now we know, like it drops. Like, I think that was like the last point where I felt like I needed to know if it was going to go up or down. And at that point I knew like it wasn't going up. So I actually felt comfort in knowing that, because before that, like my doctors and the nurses were like, well, you don't know, like maybe it'll go back up, maybe it's going to continue up. And I was like, no, like clearly this is not going up. Clearly we have to come up with some other plan. But at that point, my doctor said, you know what, I want to give it one more monitoring appointment just to see what happens. So I went back 3 days later on January 8th, and before it was 28, and then it went up a little bit, but only to 32. So staying pretty much at the same level. My follicles, once again, an 8 on the left and a 9 on the right. So it was like plateauing, right? Like it was just gonna stay there. Nothing was happening. So at that point, my doctor said, okay, here's the options that you have. We can, let this cycle ride its course, and you can see, maybe if you ovulate on your own, or if you'd like, we can try to up your dose of letrozole and see if that works. So at that point, I was like, yes, let's try to up the dose of letrozole. I don't super know what the hesitation was to not do that, because I do know that that's a pretty common process if you have PCOS and you don't respond to your dosage. So I don't know. But so that would have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's 7 monitoring appointments from December 18th through January 8th. So we were going to the doctor's office pretty consistently, to my clinic's office. But they were like, okay, cool. So previously, my last 2 cycles, I have taken 5, I think it's milligrams of letrozole. And so she said, I'm gonna up your dose to 7.5. So you're gonna take 3 pills instead. So I was like, cool, totally fine. I'm gonna go ahead and do that. So I took letrozole again for 5 days. And I think this also depends on your clinic, but I know some of the videos that I've watched where women have had to do this, their clinic tells them like, okay, so, maybe you were on cycle day 23 before. Now that we've restarted your letrozole, it basically puts you back at that same point. So I take letrozole my cycle days 5 through 9. So on January 8th, when I took the increased dose of letrozole, it basically put me back to cycle day 5. So that's how I'm gonna count it. My clinic didn't specifically say this, but just from my notes and my journal, like I want to make sure that I'm looking at the right cycle days, right? So January 13th, 5 days, the sixth day, actually, after taking my letrozole, so I took it for 5 days after January 8th, and then the next day I went in for the next monitoring appointment on the 13th. My estrogen actually was lower, so it was 16.9, but my follicle size was increased. So I did have a follicle on the right side that was size 13. And it's kind of confusing because letrozole actually, it decreases your estrogen levels. So they say that if you're on letrozole, you could have lower estrogen levels. So it might not exactly hit that 200 that they want you to see, but it also just depends. Like, I have seen women who take letrozole and they do have higher estrogen levels. I don't know if the increase maybe made my estrogen drop. I'm not 100% sure. This whole thing, there's just so much to know, and I am not a doctor, but I did think it was interesting that it did go lower, but they were happy that I was responding, that my follicle was, you know, growing, because prior to that, the biggest I had ever had was a 10. So the fact that they were seeing a 13 was a good sign. So then I went in 2 days later on January 15th, and my estrogen did increase, and it did increase to 44.9, which is awesome. Also, my follicle that was measuring at a 13 was now measuring at a 17, so perfect. That said, still not ready to trigger. I went back in on the 16th, so that was the next day. My estrogen went up again to a 71.6, biggest follicle size 18, so it just went up by 1. And then they were like, you know what, we still want you to come back, so come back again. So yesterday I went in, so January 17th, and my estrogen was 97.6 and my follicle was measuring at 19. And they were like, cool, you are a-okay, ready to trigger. So yesterday I did do my trigger shot, and I do have my IUI scheduled for tomorrow. I am feeling extremely hopeful and optimistic that this is going to be our cycle. My wife said she has good feelings. I had good feelings last cycle, so I don't know. But I am excited because we are trying with a new donor. So there is a kind of a new variable in the equation. I've also been drinking a ton of water and, you know, trying to eat healthier, at least for the last few days. So I'm feeling pretty good. I will say that yesterday, the day that I triggered and the day of my last monitoring appointment, we actually got into a car accident on the way to my appointment. So that once again put my stress levels up here. But luckily we are both safe, and you know, my insurance is going to cover some of the damage, and ultimately, like, we're both okay. It is a stressful situation, but it happened. What happened was the best possible outcome for the situation. So it could have been a lot worse, and I am trying to remain not stressed about it, even though tomorrow after my IUI, we're gonna have to go to a collision repair center and get my car assessed, and also maybe get a rental car. So there's a lot going on, but I want to not have those feelings and just try to, you know, put my body at ease and feel not stressed about everything. So I'm trying the best that I can to do that. So yeah, so we'll see what happens. I just wanted to update everyone. I really wish that I could, you know, vlog while I'm in my appointments, but my clinic has like a strict no video recording or any type of recording policy. And there's signs everywhere, so I get so nervous when I'm in there to try to like record something. Although I have seen a couple women from my clinic who also have channels and they do record, so probably it'll be okay. I'm just the type of person that doesn't like to break rules, so I get super nervous, but I'm going to try to record a little bit while I'm in the office tomorrow getting my IUI. Fingers crossed it doesn't hurt like my last one did. yeah, so my next video will be me testing out my trigger, and then I plan to once again do my live pregnancy test. So I didn't do that for the last cycle because I was feeling sad, but this cycle I do want to do my live pregnancy test. So I will see you in my next video. Fingers crossed it will be a video of me showing you a positive pregnancy test and all will be well in the world. But if not, then we'll go from there. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please do follow along. Drop me a comment below if you're trying to TTC yourself. I love connecting with other women and couples who are trying to create their family as well. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.